In this video, I'm gonna show you guys the 9 techniques you need to know to make steakhouse quality steaks at home. I learned these techniques firsthand while cooking literally thousands of steaks for paying customers as a chef, and in my opinion, if you implement them in your cooking, you simply will make great steaks. Okay, so the first steakhouse technique that you're probably missing out on is steakhouses use higher quality beef than you, or more specifically, they cut their steaks from higher grades of beef. And to refresh your memory on what a beef grade is, it's a system the USDA uses to determine beef quality, and the grades are mostly based on fat content. Select is the lowest grade and it has the least amount of fat, and it's not really steak quality, so I would avoid it. Choice beef is the middle grade, and that's the majority of the beef that the average person in North America buys to cook for steaks. The highest grade is prime beef. This grade has the highest fat content and it makes the best steaks. But prime steaks are hard to find and they are super expensive, about 30% more per pound than choice. The main difference in quality between you and a steakhouse usually doesn't come down to their prime steak versus your choice though. It's actually a different grade of beef called upper 2/3 choice. Upper 2/3 is the fattiest of all of the choice grade meat, and it's the bread and butter of a steakhouse menu. It satisfies you as a consumer because it's a fattier, richer steak than you're used to buying at the grocery store, and it satisfies the owners of the steakhouse because it's cheaper to buy than prime and priced in a way where they can usually make a good margin on it.
Oh my God, that's so fatty.
So how do you as an aspiring steaksman or woman get your hands on these high-end steaks? There's 2 main options. Number 1, if you want the absolute best, you'll source prime steaks from your butcher. To get these though, you'll probably want to call ahead of time because most butchers don't always stock prime, and be prepared to pay $17 to even $30 a pound for the classic steaks cut from the rib section, the filet, the strip, and the ribeye. Option 2 is to find some upper 2/3 choice at your grocery store. The easiest way to determine if the beef you're buying is upper 2/3 is the brand name. The most widely available upper 2/3 brand in the US is CAB, or Certified Angus Beef. This CAB branding just means that the cattle that have been used have a certain percentage of Angus beef genetics, and the beef that's been selected has hit that upper 2/3 of fat content. One important factor that can impact beef quality is dry aging. You've probably seen that on a steakhouse menu before and thought to yourself, oh my God, that's a very large price tag. Is it worth my money, or are they trying to rip me off? Well, dry aging is essentially controlled decomposition. As the beef ages, the enzymes in the meat break down the proteins, which make the meat more tender. Dry aging can also make meat taste more umami or slightly cheesy, and it removes a bunch of moisture from the steak, which is a good thing. Beef with less water in it is much easier to sear a deep brown crust into. A lot of steakhouses offer expensive dry-aged steak, and some of them even age them in-house, which is cool, but in my opinion, the grade of the beef matters a lot more than whether or not it's dry aged. Simply put, having beef with more intramuscular fat will instantly upgrade your steak situation. The second steakhouse technique that you're probably missing is knowing how to cook each individual cut of steak. Every popular cut out there has its own muscle structure, form factor, and fat content, and they all need to be handled differently so that they can reach their highest potential. Let's start with filet. Filet is very lean, so steakhouses usually serve it with a flavorful sauce like bordelaise, béarnaise, or au poivre sauce. I'll throw a link in the description to 2 videos where I show you how to make a bordelaise or au poivre sauce that are perfect for serving with filet. Also, filet needs to be mid-rare in my opinion. If it's medium or higher, it gets really dry because there's no fat to keep things lubed up. At home, I think it's best to cook a filet in a saute pan with a generous amount of oil. This gives you way more Maillard browning reaction than a grill because you're adding more fat into the system. Grilled fillets can be fine, but chances are your grill isn't very hot or very good, and it's not going to sear the meat like a pan would. Also, skip prime filet because it's too expensive and has almost no more fat than a choice filet would. For ribeye, I would say cook it to low medium, which means pull it off the heat at about 128 to 132 F. This is a hot take, I know, but rare or mid-rare ribeyes just don't render enough of the internal fat, and you're left with a chewy, flabby result. If you cook a ribeye just a little bit more, that intramuscular fat's gonna melt beautifully, boosting tenderness and delivering that prized buttery texture. I think if you really paid attention at a steakhouse, you'd see a lot of partially chewed fat on the plates of people who ordered rare or mid-rare ribeyes. For that New York strip, cook it to mid-rare and make sure to render the fat cap on the edges really well. Most people neglect this when they're cooking strips, and then they wonder why they had to cut white flabbiness off of every single bite. To get this right, I I would give it a minimum of 4 to 5 minutes over medium heat, standing right on this edge. This will make this otherwise inedible part of the steak very unctuous and delicious. I also biased my New York strip cookery towards saute pans because this is still a relatively lean steak, and in my opinion, it just tastes better when seared in fat instead of grilled over direct dry heat. For sirloin steaks, which are usually the most budget-friendly option on a steakhouse menu, I would use some form of tenderization before cooking. For that, I like to use a tool called a jacquard. This breaks down the protein structure in the meat and makes it feel more tender in your mouth. You can also mimic this jacquard tool by poking the steak with a fork 15 to 20 times per side. At this point, if you're wondering about the bone-in steaks like T-bone or porterhouse, I would recommend avoiding them. I don't like them because I think they're hard to cook, especially for the home cook. They have two different cuts of steak held together with a common bone, and this pretty much guarantees that you're not going to cook either steak properly because you have to cook both of them at the same time. Plus, this big ass bone keeps the meat from being fully in contact with the pan or a grill, and that always leaves big sections near the bone that don't quite take a sear. But Bri, doesn't cooking meat on the bone make it taste better? No. Not really. I think that's a myth. Cooking meat properly makes it taste better, and bone-in steaks are just too hard to cook properly for the home cook. Technique 3 comes down to product more than process, and it's that steakhouses use thicker steaks than you, because generally speaking, thicker steaks are better. Steakhouse steaks lean towards 2 inches thick at least, and I'm willing to bet the steaks that you're getting from the grocery store are closer to 1 inch maximum. This is because thicker steaks are easier to cook properly than thin ones. Thin steaks are the majority of what you see at a basic grocery store, and we all know that those cook super quickly. This makes nailing the preferred internal temperature basically impossible, and you end up with a well-done steak. Thicker steaks also have a more interesting textural dynamic than thin ones. This is because there's a higher ratio of inner meat to outer crust. Don't get me wrong, the outer crust part is delicious, but if you're eating a steak that's primarily made up of that, it's not really a proper steak experience. When I eat steak, I want big bites of juicy red meat, and I want an outer seared crust. With a thin steak, you either have one or the other. So when you shop for your steakhouse steaks at the butcher shop, try to go for 1.5 inches at least, but preferably lean towards 2 inches. Technique 4 is a simple one, and it's tempering your steak. Steakhouses almost never cook steaks directly from the refrigerator. Instead, the cooks take them out of the fridge as you enjoy your appetizer of shrimp cocktail or wedge salad and give the steak about 20 minutes to warm up before they throw it under the broiler. Why is that? Well, cooking a steak that's around 65F instead of fresh from the fridge at 38F makes a huge difference for 2 reasons. Number 1, it speeds up cook time. Simply put, a warmer steak takes less time to cook. Cooking a steak from 38 degrees to 130 just takes more time than 68 to 130. Also, a fridge cold steak cools down your pan or grill significantly, especially if you're cooking more than one steak at a time. This not only adds cook time, but it makes getting a nice sear harder. The second and more important reason why tempering is crucial for a great steak is that it enables much more even cooking. A cold steak is just much more likely to have a mid-well outside and a rare inside. This is because the temperature gradient from inside to out is almost 30 degrees. This means the outside starts cooking before the inside. On the other hand, a tempered steak has much less contrast, and as a result, the heat penetrates the steak more evenly. To prove it, check out the cross-section of a cold steak versus a room temperature steak. The cold steak is rare in the middle and overcooked around the outside, and the tempered steak is a nice rosy pink all the way through. It almost looks sous vide. So the next time you're planning a steak night, do your future self a favor. Pull the steaks from the fridge about 20 to 30 minutes before cooking. The 5th steakhouse technique that you're missing for perfect steaks at home is high heat cooking. Steakhouses use insanely high heat to sear their steaks, and in general, home cooks don't. This is actually a very big differentiator. I think for most home cooks watching this video, heat is kind of like salt in that you're afraid to use too much of it. And I get it. It can be pretty scary when you either lose control of it or you have too much of it in one place. You can burn your food or your body, or you can light your oil on fire if your pan is too hot. In steakhouses, they almost always cook their steaks in a charbroiler, which is a diabolical combination of a grill and a gas broiler. This sears the meat super quickly at temperatures around 450 to 550, and it gives you a deep brown crust on the meat. In my opinion, the best way to replicate this insane heat level at home is a multi-layer, high-quality saute pan. This transfers heat to the meat beautifully if you've got the right pan. The one that I like to use is from Made In. They happen to be sponsoring this video, but that's kind of a convenient coincidence. I'd be using this pan either way. If you're not familiar, Made In pans are professional quality cookware that's designed for the home cook. These pans are so pro that they've been used in over 2,000 top-rated restaurants across the US. US, including multiple restaurants with 3 Michelin stars. Look at Eric Repair using Made-In pans. Nice pan, chef. We have so much in common. I use Made-In's pots and pans to cook pretty much all of my food, whether it's dinner or a 5-part recipe video, and I really love them. So far in this video, I've been bouncing back and forth between the 10 and 12-inch stainless pan from their stainless clad collection, and it uses a 5-ply stainless material that gives you great heat retention, even heating, and it helps create that nice Maillard reaction that you need for a well-seared steak. These stainless pans are really heavy duty too. They can go from the stovetop to the oven up to 800F, so they can handle whatever you need them to. So if you're looking to upgrade your steak cookery, you might want to look into upgrading your cookware too. Check out the stainless collection and Made-In's other cookware by using the link in my description to save some money on your order. So aside from a high quality multi-layer pan, the main thing you need to know with this technique is to just use more heat than you think. I've basically never seen a home cook effectively sear at a temperature that I thought was high enough. Obviously, if your pan or grill seems to be too hot, you can turn it down and cook things a little bit slower, but I prefer leaning towards more heat because it's actually harder to speed things up once you start cooking than it is to slow them down. In fact, I think a high heat to low heat approach is a really good tactic for a thick steak. I'll start with a really hard sear on both sides, then finish the steak in a low oven for about 4 to 5 minutes, or I'll turn the heat down on one side of my grill and create a lower temperature zone. This gives you the best of both worlds. You get a ton of searing right up front to get color and flavor on your steak, and then you move it to a lower heat environment where you have a little bit more control and things aren't happening so quickly. The 6th technique here is a really big one, and aside from beef quality and using enough heat, this is the technique that most home cooks are really falling short on, and it's salt. You just aren't using enough of it. To prove my point, I asked my wife Lauren to add what she thought was an appropriate amount of salt for this 16-ounce ribeye.
Okay, it's a good amount of salt. What?
Are you serious?
It's a lot of salt.
This is a pound of meat.
To be fair, I'm the one that cooks all the meat, and Lauren is actually a very good cook, but it shows that the average home cook doesn't know how much salt to use. A great steakhouse would use at least triple this amount. Cut to a clip that I recorded on the line at Wright's Tavern, the best steakhouse here in St. Louis. This is Chef Sam adding the amount of salt that he would for a steak during service. As you can see, that's a lot of salt. For this 22-ounce or 550 gram strip steak, I estimate that he used about 12 to 15 grams, which is about 2 to 2.5% by weight. You guys are probably shocked by that amount of salt, but this is what the pros do that make their steaks so much better than yours. At home, this is what that ratio of salt looks like for a 12-ounce steak. I'm giving it about 2 strong 2-finger pinches per side, so it's about 8 to 10 grams. Again, this might seem like a lot, but that's just how much these steaks need. It's a thick piece of meat and all of the salt's on the outside, so we need to overcompensate. One caveat is that I'm seasoning this steak from a height to get a wide, even dispersion of salt, and that means that only about 75% actually hits the steak. The rest either falls off or misses it completely and goes onto the little sheet tray underneath. What about pepper, Bri? Well, pepper on a steak is awesome, and I use a lot of it, but I don't think it's a seasoning like salt. Pepper is a spice. It doesn't change the chemical structure of the meat in any way. It just brings its own peppery flavor. Also, a lot of people are overly worried about burning pepper on steaks. That's not really a problem. Pepper is actually pretty hard to burn, and even when it's toasted really dark, it still tastes great. To prove this point, here's a fillet that I crusted in peppercorns and then seared in a 500F pan for 8 to 10 minutes. As you can see, this pepper isn't burnt, and it tastes so dope. One more very important note when it comes to steak and salt. You should season your steak with salt at least 20 to 30 minutes before you cook it. When you salt meat ahead of time, it not only makes it taste better, but it actually helps it stay juicier while we're cooking. At first, the salt pulls water from the inside of the meat to the outside surface. Then that salt dissolves into that water, creating a brine on the outside. Then over time, this brine gets sucked back into the meat, carrying all that salt inside, and this makes the meat taste good. Also, once inside, that salt changes the meat's protein structure, which allows it to hold on to more water during cooking. And more water means more juicy. You love it when the meat's more juicy. If you're wondering about adding steak seasoning or spice blends to your steak, well, steak seasoning can work okay, but only on the grill. It'll burn really bad in a saute pan. Personally, I skip it because for me, the point of steak is the taste of steak, and the seasoning blends get in the way of that, and they inhibit browning on the meat itself, and instead just make the steak taste kind of like charred spices, which I don't like. The 7th technique is extremely simple and very effective, yet almost no home cooks that I know do it. I'm talking about drying off your steak before you cook it. It's simple enough. Wet meat can't take a sear. For the Maillard browning reaction to occur, the surface of the meat needs to be at least 275F, preferably higher. If your meat is wet, when you put it in the pan or on the grill, it's gonna steam. Of course, that steam is around 212F, the boiling point of water, and as long as that steam is present, the surface of the beef will not enter the epic, delicious Maillard browning zone. Steakhouse steaks taste better than yours, not only because they use more salt or better tasting beef, but it's also because they get so much more browning than you. And a lot of this comes from them just using dried off steak. Let's say you've taken my advice and you've pulled your meat out of the fridge before you're gonna cook it. That's gonna create condensation, which makes the meat wet. Also, there's gonna be residual moisture from the beef sitting in its own juices in the packaging. And then when you add salt, that draws out more water. Some of that gets absorbed, but also some of it stays on the outside of the steak. And now you've got wet meat. If you go to cook this as is, it's gonna be Steam City, USA, dude. I defy anyone to get a great sear on meat that's this wet.
Oh my God, gray as hell.
So to make this thing much easier to brown, just dab off both sides with 2 layers of paper towel until the surface is dry and matte like this. Dry meat's gonna sear so much better and it's gonna taste so much better, so don't skip it. This is a really easy step. The 8th technique that you need to know to make steakhouse quality steaks at home is cooking by temperature, not time. Most home cooks that I know have 2 main units of measure when it comes to cooking meat: time per pound or minutes per side. That's not effective. This is like driving blindfolded and counting the number of seconds to know when to turn. The speed at which your meat gets cooked is in no way a constant, and every single technique that I've mentioned in this video somehow adds a variable that's going to impact how long it takes to get cooked properly. So instead of using folk wisdom to say cook a 2-inch ribeye for 5 minutes per side, just use an instant read thermometer and cook the steak until it reaches the temperature that you want. For mid-rare, that'll be about 123 to 125. For medium, it's about 128 to 132, and for mid-well, 135 to 138. All 3 of these temperature windows allow for a 5 to 7 degree carryover, so the steak will rest into the temperature that you want. All I'm saying here is temperature is extremely important. You can get all of the other details that I mentioned in this video perfectly right, but still ruin your steak night because you overcooked the steak. I'll link to the best budget instant read that I know of, and then the nicer one that I like to use in the description if you need one. The 9th and final technique is actually 2 simple techniques that you do after the steak is cooked. The first of which is resting the steak for a minimum of 5 minutes, but preferably 10 minutes. If you cut in any earlier, the steak isn't going to reach its full potential. Some people say the juices run out. I don't know if that's scientifically true. I just know that the steak needs to finish cooking during this 10-minute rest period, and overall, the steak is better when I do it. The last little detail is kind of a bonus, but it's a non-negotiable. You have to serve your steak on a warm plate. Once a steak is rested, it's not going to be that hot. We're talking about maybe 120F. If you put that on a room temperature plate that's about 65 to 70F, that plate's going to suck all the heat out of this nice meat that you just spent so much time making taste good. And it's going to be room temperature in less than 5 minutes. So once your steak comes out of the pan, put a plate in the oven at 300F and let it warm up while your steak rests. This will keep your steak and your sides nice and hot for the entire duration of your steak experience. Don't skip this step, or any of the steps in this video for that matter. All of these, with the exception of the steak purchase itself, are effectively free and super easy to implement. So basically nothing is stopping you from making the best steaks of your life at home very soon. If you guys like this video and you want to see another, then check out this video where I show you how to make chicken breast less dry. Go ahead, click it. I'm asking, I'm begging, I am dying for you to click it. Just do it.